Okay, so here I've pre-torn my card. You can see I've labeled the back with a little B for the back of the paper. And this is the Arches watercolor paper with the 150-pound paper or 300-gram paper. Here's my ultramarine blue. It's one of my new paints. I've never used it before. So let's see, I can't really read this text on the tube. It's way, way too small for me. So I got my magnifying glass and can take a look and see if I can read the text. You can also look online for the information. You don't have to get it all off of the tube. Alright, so I went ahead and wrote all the information on my card. I got a front side and a back side. You can see I put all the information I could possibly find. Some of it I had to look online for. In the top right, I have it labeled with the Danielle Smith. It's a light fastness rating 1, so it's got really good light fastness. It's medium staining, so when I go to lift it off, it's going to leave a little bit of color, and it's transparent, so that I can easily see through it to underneath. And that's what the information is, so we'll try that out. Now here I'm going to use my Sharpie to make a black line. And I want to use a pen that is not going to smear when it gets wet. So I have to wait for that Sharpie to dry a little bit. Now I put that PB29, that's the pigment, in the bottom and the center of the card. And so you can see when you buy paints what colors you're actually getting based on the pigment. Now I'm going to wet down a square of space up in the upper right. I'm not going to go over the letters or anything. I just want to make it nice and wet. Now you want it to be shimmery but not puddly ultimately. So you have to give the water a little bit of time to sink in. I can see if I can tilt the card and show you the shimmer. It's not too well here because the way the lighting is. But you can look at your card from an angle to kind of see where you're looking at and where you're painting with water. And you do want completely clear water. Now here you can kind of see there's a little bit of a puddle on there. But that's okay, we're going to let it soak in a minute and we'll come back and damp up some of that water. Oh, there we go. A little bit of paper towel. Go over it again just for good measure. And I know this seems like a kind of tedious thing to go over that same spot over and over and over again, but you want a very damp paper so that when the paint hits it, it's going to spread very, very easily depending on the kind of paint that you have. All right, now I'm going to take paint directly out of the tube. This is a rare moment. Generally, you do not do this. This is just because I want a super concentrated, absolute, this is the pigment for these cards. So I'm going to take just a tiny bit of that on the tip of my brush. Here you can see how much I put on. It's very, very little. And I'm going to work from the left to the right, but basically you want a really dark spot of pigment. And you want to see how thick it is when it goes over to that black. And so you're going to make it nice and dark. You're going to come back with some more water on your brush and kind of blend it out a little bit. And you have to play with this a little bit to get a feel for it, to see how much water on your brush you really want. Then go ahead and pull it across in an L shape across the bottom of the card. Rinse out my brush and come back with just some water so I can see how light I can make it. Because you want to see a full range of what that paint can do, how much water you can add to it and still see the color, and how light you can make it versus how dark you can make it. I mean, the dark side of this ultramarine blue is it's almost completely black here. So I took some direct pigment again, a little bit more, and I'm putting it on my palette and swirling it around and making some palette blue. So I'm going to add some water to it so you'll be able to see how thick it actually is when I go to put it in that wet area on my paper. So I'm going to mix it up really well with that water because you want a nice even pigment spread in the water. You can see how wet I'm making the paint. It's thick but not, super gooey. Okay, and I'm going to brush some of that off of the brush there so I'm not losing all of my pigment. Now I'm going to re-wet that square a little bit because it's dried some. So let's take a very clean brush and some water and put that back in that square again. You can see the paper's already starting to bow a little bit because of the water in the paper, and that's correct. Now I'm going to take just that color and drop it right into the center and watch how it flows out of the center where I dropped it. You want to resist the urge to go paint in that square. All you're doing is dropping in color to see. Now you might do a couple of taps. I'll do that a little bit later so you can see how adding more pigment does that. Now with the rest of my pigment that's on my palette and on my brush, or at least some of it, I'm going to go and play in the play area of the card just to see what kinds of things I can do. How can I push the paint around? How much of that paint can I lift off with a dry brush? What color does it leave behind? Remember, this one's medium staining, so it shouldn't come up completely, and make a white paper again. You should still see some of the paper under there. So how much of that can I brush off? And the longer you let the paint sit on the paper, the more staining it's going to be if it's a staining color. Some of the non-staining colors you can completely pick up even after it's completely dry. So here's another card. We're going to do this Amazonite Genuine. And I wrote on the back with the information that it had. Notice there's a lot less information than the other card, and that's okay. You write anything you can find so that you have an easy reference sheet. And once again, wetting that square again. And we'll let that soak in. And while that's soaking in, I'm going to take just a tip of that out of the tube again to see exactly what color it can make for its absolute thickest point. You can see a little bit on the tip. Go ahead and put that on there. It's a lot thicker than that ultramarine blue was. It's got a bit of a grain to it, I guess. It's a good way to say that. It also isn't blending out as well as the ultramarine blue did. The genuine paints from Danielle Smith are actual ground up stone and stuff. So it's understandable that it's not going to spread as well. So I kind of have to mix it to get it to pull it across. So you can see I kind of have to scrub at it. Add a little bit of water to my brush. See how much I can lighten that. That's going to be a really good ocean watercolor for a Caribbean painting, I think. It's really pretty. You can see little bits of grain in it and how thick it is up the side. And how much over the black it covers and hides or doesn't hide. Because it's transparent, that black comes straight through. It's not hiding that black at all. Let's go back over that square again with a nice clean brush. Make it nice and wet. Shimmery, not puddled. I'm going to say that a lot, is the shimmery, not puddled. It takes a lot of experience to get the exact wetness that you want. So it'll take a little bit of time and practice. Let's clean the brush, mix up some paint so we have something to drop in the wet area. And whoop, there it goes. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more of that just to see how it spreads. It didn't go very far. It just kind of sat there. It's got a little bit of the tenderleaf stuff coming off the side, but it didn't take over the square. And not quite as much as the ultramarine blue. We had to touch it a couple of times to get the same amount of flow that we had with the single touch for the ultramarine blue. You can come back and play with it a little bit, see what we can do. A nice even color, and I'm going to make it a little thicker here on my palette so I can get a better range in this play area. See how even I can make it. How well does it lift off? Now this one says it's non-staining, so we should be able to go back to the white paper with our dry brush lifting it off. And it goes pretty clear on the paper. So let's set that one aside. Pick up this quinacridone sienna here. So it's got that 1 light fastness rating, and it's low staining and transparent. The transparents are really great for flower petals and things where you're going to layer your paint and you want to see the different colors below it. Now I have a number in the lower right corner of my cards. That's just how I label my paints, paint number 41 in my collection. You can hear that car going by. Let's wet this down really good. And go ahead and take a tip of the quinacridone sienna there. Yeah, see how that smears quite nicely compared to that Amazonite. Go ahead and rinse out the brush a bit. Back with some water and see how it blends out and what colors we can make it. And blend out some water over here so I can see how thickly it covers that black or doesn't, based on how thick the paint is. I'm going to tap in some of that quinacridone sienna, and it flowed pretty well. See how it kind of crawled out pretty decently? That's what you're looking for some of your watercolor effects. I'll go ahead and paint some in the play area. See how the paint can be pushed around the paper a little bit. And it's low staining, so we can see how much stays on the paper when we try to pick it off. And that's with the clean, damp brush, trying to lift. It comes up pretty well. It looks like the longer you leave this one sit on the paper, the more it's going to stain. And the last one, with an airplane overhead. I don't know if you'll be able to hear that or not. So here's Payne's Gray. You'll see this in a lot of videos on YouTube. And it's got that PB29. I point that out because that's the ultramarine blue. And that PBK9 is ivory black. So if I were to take my ultramarine blue and my ivory black paints and mix them together, I would be getting Payne's Gray. When you mix the pigments like that, it's convenience colors so that you don't have to mix them to come up with your color. Let's take a bit of that out of the tube. Once again, you do not want to be painting from the tube like this on a usual basis. This is just for these cards. Yeah, it's very dry, that Payne's Gray. It does seem to flow out pretty well when you try to blend it. It's got some of that granularity in it. That granularity is coming from the ivory black. Ivory black is really pretty, but it's got little specks and stuff in it that look neat for texture. There's a lot of videos that say that watercolors shouldn't have black in them and you shouldn't ever purchase a black paint. I personally really like the blacks, and I have several different ones and can tell you the different things about each one of them, and why I would use one versus the other. But it's really unnecessary. So here I am dropping it in. It's got a pretty good flow to it too. Let's go put it in the play area, see what we can do to it. Now this one says it's staining, so the longer this sits on the paper, the less likely we're going to be able to lift off the different shades to get back to that white paper. So let's see if that's a true statement. So I go to try to pick it up. You'll see it's leaving quite a bit of color on the paper. With my clean, damp brush, by the way, I'm trying to pick this up. I'm not adding any water to it. I'm just trying to lift up what's on the paper. But that's basically how you're going to set up your cards.